Hello and welcome to The Long View, a podcast that takes a closer look at the games people play. The Long View is a proud member of the Dice Tower Network. Go to dicetower.com to find a podcast that is perfect for you and your gaming interests. The Dice Tower is also home to great reviews, news, and commentary, so check out the Dice Tower. The Long View is also generously sponsored by GameSurplus.com. www.gamesurplus.com is your best choice for online game purchases. Thor and his family are always ready to find a hard-to-get import. They have the latest and greatest releases, and their customer service is truly second to none. So check out GameSurplus.com when you place your order, and be sure to tell them the Long View sent you. My name is Jeff Gamble, and today I'm very proud to be joined once again all the way from England by Martin Griffiths, who is a returning guest with me on the show. And Martin and I have worked on a couple of different episodes in the past, and I'm going to be excited to talk with him tonight about the game of Pax Porfiriana. So Martin, hello and welcome, and thanks for agreeing to be on the show.
Oh, hi Jeff, it's good to be back again.
Well, thank you very much, and I also feel I need to give a special shout-out to you there for your Geek of the Week honors, which was last week while I was away. I was at BGG-Con, and I kind of noticed when I got home that apparently you were Geek of the Week, so congratulations.
Yeah. Oh, thanks very much. Yeah, I had a week where it was BGG-Con at the beginning and Thanksgiving at the end, but still got plenty of good questions and had a great time, so yeah, it was fun.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, you know, I was kind of surprised when I kind of learned that you had not already been Geek of the Week. I sort of assumed that you already were a Geek of the Week. So I think it's a well-deserved honor. You know, you write quite extensively on Board Game Geek, and your contributions, I think, are known by a lot of people. So I'm having fun kind of going back and sort of going through the posts and responses and things and learning a little bit about you in the process, and that's been a lot of fun. So congratulations once again on that.
Thanks, Jeff.
So, Martin, as you probably know, because I think I can brag and say that you do listen to the show, I have been, you know, for the past year or so doing a little intro segment where we take a look at a year in board gaming. And so tonight, Martin, you are the lucky winner of the year. 97, I think, is your year, yes?
Sounds good.
Absolutely. And you know what? Funny enough, the first game listed in 1997 is Tigris and Euphrates. Now, I'm not going to bother to ask you what you think about that because I think we already know.
You know, I played it recently. I've gone off it, you know.
Yeah. Now, Martin, you were the one that recorded with me about Tigris and Euphrates. And,
yeah, that's right.
I would encourage any listeners, if you want to learn more about that Reiner Knizia classic, to go back in the archives there in the Long View and take a listen to that entire episode. It was quite a lot of fun to talk with you about that game. One little brief note that I will say about it is that after our episode, I ended up reacquiring it. I had traded it away, and after talking with you about it and thinking a lot about it, you know, I want to get that game back. So I have reacquired Tigris and Euphrates. So I'm looking forward to trying to get that to the table a little bit more often because that game really is a classic. I'm sure you'd agree.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I hope you manage to get some good plays of it in soon.
Yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to it and trying to kind of get it into the regular rotation again. Taking a look down our list, we have the next game, which is Bonanza. This is a Uwe Rosenberg game. It's probably his best-known card game. And it's the one that's about collecting beans and then planting them in fields and then harvesting them. And it has one very unique sort of mechanic, which is the order in which the cards are in your hand as you draw them may not be changed. And I think that was one of the things that I found very unique about the game. And yet it didn't go over real well with my family. Maybe my kids were too young at the time that I tried to teach this game, or maybe they were a little too reluctant to negotiate, because it seems to me in Bonanza you really have to negotiate. But it didn't stick around in the collection. The Rosenberg card game that stayed in my collection was Nottingham, which I still play with the kids even to this day. But Bonanza didn't make it. Do you have any impressions of Bonanza, or have you ever played that?
Yeah, I've played it a few times. I quite like it. I enjoy games that are quite talkative, involve, like you say, it should really involve quite a lot of negotiation. It's basically a trading game. Yeah, I don't own it myself, but friends have it. I've played it quite a few times with them, and I think it's pretty fun. I like the that mechanic you described. It's always meaning that you have things to think about because you know the cards are going to come in that order, and there's nothing you can do about it. So you're having to try and wheel and deal with the other players to make things work out in your favor. I'm a real fan. In fact, Rosenberg's earlier games more than his later ones. I think. He's obviously more famous now for the Harvest games and these quite complex worker placement games. But I really like Bonanza. I really like Mamma Mia as well, the pizza making card game. I don't know that one Nottingham you just mentioned. Actually, I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, I'd forgotten that Mamma Mia was his as well, and I really enjoy that game quite a bit. I think it's quite clever with the way you have to put the ingredients in the oven and then try to remember what's already in there and then take them out.
Yeah,
Nottingham has an interesting little. It's sort of a loosely themed Robin Hood kind of game. It was put out by Uber Play, and consequently Tanga, which is a retailer here in the United States,
great.
sort of like a clearance outlet. I think I got a case of like 10 of them for like $10 back in the heyday of Tanga, and everybody got a copy of Nottingham as a present. It's actually, I think it's a cute little game. I enjoy it. You kind of have a choice. You flip a card over on a central deck, and then your choice is to either take that card into your hand. It's a set collection game, or to basically execute the action that is on the card, depicted on the card. So the action could be take a blind draw from someone else's hand, and then they get the card that you flipped over that allowed you to do that as their sort of compensation for you stealing a
Oh,
card.
cool.
Or it'll be what my kids like to call the spread 'em and weep card, which is where the other player has to lay their whole hand down on the table where everybody can see it, and then you pick whatever cards you want. Or you can set an ambush for another player with a gold card, and then when they try to turn in a certain type of item, you can ambush them and steal one of the cards. And so there's a lot of interaction in the game, and yet it seems to move along pretty well. And I think it's rather quite clever. It's light, but it's a lot of fun, and it plays I think like up to 6 or 7 players. It's got a very high player count. So if you can manage to find yourself a copy, I would definitely recommend it.
Yeah, cool. I'll look out for it.
Next up on our list is For Sale. I've already talked a lot about For Sale on different episodes of the show, telling kind of my feelings about it. I think it's kind of one of those classic sort of super filler games. I'm curious if you have any impressions of For Sale and what your thoughts are.
Oh yeah, I totally agree with you. This has been a filler that's been in regular circulation since as long as I've been playing games and going to games clubs. It was one of the first games I came across when I started going to London on board, and like 5 6 years ago, and it still gets played regularly. You can't expect more than that from a game that was published 15 16 years ago. I mean, it's definitely a classic. Simple rules, but enough to think about. A really good game.
Yeah, I agree, and I think it's one of the reasons I like it so much is it had that distinct sort of two-part play. So everything that all of the properties that you acquired in the first part of the game are then used to acquire the checks in the second part of the game. That sort of A phase, B phase I found was really interesting, and something that I think was kind of picked up on by some other designers, most notably Dr. Finn for Biblios, or Scripts and
Right.
Scribes as it used to be called, which kind of has that distinctive A phase, B phase kind of feel to it. So I agree. It's just a very clever game and very simple. And I know, at heart, you're a person who prefers games that are a little more simple and straightforward than some of the more, complex or you might say convoluted types of rule sets and game systems that are out there that seem to be rather popular right now. Yes?
Yeah, definitely. So looking back at these '90s games, I'm seeing a lot of stuff that I really enjoy. Yeah.
Next up, we have an expansion for Settlers of Catan Seafarers. I actually never played that. I did play Settlers of Catan Early on in sort of my board gaming sort of, I still have not found a term for this. It's kind of weird. My board gaming hobby interest, I guess we'll call it. But Catan didn't stick with me. I didn't care for it as much as everybody else did. So I never had a chance to play Seafarers. Have you had a chance to play that?
No, I actually quite like Catan. I would still happily play it, but I've never played with any of the expansions. I don't think. Again, probably my preference for fairly simple rule sets. The base game is fine for me. It's quite interactive. You have the trading. It's a fun game. But no, I've never embellished it with any of the many available expansions.
Well, I guess we'll have to leave that one sitting by the wayside there. Next up would be Jungle Speed. This is a dexterity game with a infamous large wooden totem that smashes people's fingers. Because of that, I have yet to actually play it because I'm a little worried my kids would get their fingers smashed trying to play this game. Have you played this?
Yeah, I played it a couple of times and it was fun. I quite like these kind of speed recognition type games. The one I play a lot more from the same kind of genre is Spot It or Dobble as it's known in the UK. But yeah, I've played Jungle Speed a few times and it was fun. I mean, not much more to say about it. I guess it's there's not much to it, but yeah, a good time.
There we go. How about Colossal Arena? I have no experience with this at all, but I think it's still in print.
Yeah, this is a Reiner Knizia game, so obviously I had to check it out at some point. It's a kind of, and the idea thematically is that there are these mythical beasts kind of battling in an arena, and you're betting on the one that you think is going to win, and also playing cards that will influence the outcome. Yeah, not probably one of my favorite Knizia designs, but then he has so many that I love. I enjoyed it, played it a couple of times, didn't really feel the need to acquire a copy. The Cheaty Mages, the Seiji Kanai game, which one of the Japanese games, which AEG has just re-released, has a really similar theme and quite a lot of similarities in the gameplay as well, actually. A bit more of a crazy and chaotic game where the Knizia game is a bit more controlled, but that one's fun too.
Excellent. Well, I saw that one while I was at BGGCon, but I didn't have a chance to play it. So I might try and take a peek at that one if I can get my hands on a copy of it. Colossal Arena, again, I'm not a big kind of fan of the head-to-head sort of battling games like Summoner Wars and things like that. It's just not particularly my cup of tea. But I've heard good things about it. And then there was also this new one, this Tosh Kalar or something like that, I believe, that was just released, which is kind of the same sort of a thing, but it's got a little interesting twist in that you're trying to sort of create these patterns and positions on the board, which will then allow you to summon in a creature or a hero that's going to fight for you. And I thought that was kind of a different sort of take on that as well. It was actually struck me as a lot more abstract than thematic. What would you say as far as Colossal Arena? Is it pretty much a straightforward bash versus bash, or was there some math hiding in there, as there usually is in a Knizia game?
Yeah. I mean, it's more of a gambling game than a battling game, I'd say. You're kind of putting down bets on these different creatures, and then the cards you're playing on them pretty much come down to numbers. There are some special powers as well, but yeah, it's certainly a fairly Knizia typical. There's definitely a mathematical core underneath there, but yeah, it's fun.
Excellent. All right, so it's more of a betting game. All right, well, that's interesting. How about the next one I see here, which is Primordial Soup? I've heard a lot about this one. This is the pooping game, as people like to talk about it, but I haven't yet to have a chance to try it. I understand it's actually a fairly deep and can be a rather long game, whereas your amoebas kind of, I think they're amoebas, kind of travel around and try to eat things and then poop other things out, and this is kind of how the game goes. I know I'm doing a wonderful job of selling it, but have you played this one at all?
Yes, I have. I've played this 3 times, I think, and I like it a lot. It's there are it feels maybe a bit of an old-fashioned design. It probably does go on a bit longer than it really needs to, and there is quite a lot of the time is just moving these amoebas around and accounting for all the different cubes that they're eating and then pooping out, as you say. Quite a lot of upkeep there, but it's it's a great theme, and you have all these gene cards which are available, which give your amoebas different adaptations. So you can customize the way you go. You can have your amoebas become more aggressive and try and feed on the other players' amoebas rather than just eating poop, or you can have them evolve to be able to control the direction they go in better, so that they can find the good sources of food. Because your basic amoeba starts off just being washed around by whichever way the current's drifting, but you can then adapt to be able to choose the direction you go in, or there's a whole bunch of different gene cards, and you can only probably have two or three, maybe four at a time. So the players will go in different directions with those, get different combinations that they like, and it has some pretty hilarious moments when the amoebas start dying and you have someone who's got the aggressive cards and is going around feeding on the other players. And I had a great time with it the last time I played, with some of the guys from London on board. It can be a lot of fun.
Well, I'll have to give that one a try. I know that that's in the ConCon library when I go to ConCon, which is in Stamford, Connecticut, here in the United States in March. There's a couple copies of it that are always there, and I've been this close to pulling it off the shelf and trying it, but I haven't done it yet. But maybe that's the little push I needed to give that one a shot. So thanks for giving me a more detailed understanding of what that game's about. Next up on the list here, I find Mississippi Queen, which is a game that I played. I owned it for a little while. I found it to be a game that just came to me at the wrong time. If it had come to me a couple years earlier when my kids were a little younger, I think it would have gotten more playtime. But we had other kind of race games and things at that point that the kids preferred, so it ended up being traded. But I did really appreciate a couple of things about the game. Number one, the sort of modular nature of the board, the river. I thought that was really interesting, the way that kind of revealed itself as you traveled further down the river. You'd see more and more of the river. I thought that was kind of nifty. And, of course, the steamships themselves with their paddle wheels, and you could set your speed on the paddle wheels. And I like the sort of puzzle aspect of it, of trying to get your ship going at the right speed to be able to stop off and actually come to a stop when it needed to pick up passengers and then move them down the river. So I thought it was a very clever game. It was beautiful to look at. But, ultimately, I just kind of found that it wasn't a game that was going to stay in my collection for the reasons I've talked about. Did you have a chance to play Mississippi Queen?
Yeah, and actually pretty much the same story for me. It was one that I owned for a while. I played maybe 5 or 6 times. I liked parts of it. It was pretty fun, but I didn't really feel like it was something I needed to play many more times. I felt like I'd seen pretty much what it does. The expansion is supposed to be worthwhile and make it a bit more interesting, but it's fairly hard to find, and I didn't really want to spend more money on that, so I ended up trading it away, and I haven't really missed it too much.
Right, yeah, that's the Black Rose, I think it's called, expansion,
Right.
and I did the same thing. I'm like, oh, maybe I'll pick up the expansion, but the expansion was actually harder to get and more expensive than the base game, and I'm like,
Yeah.
no, not going to do that. So, Chicken Cha 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 is on this list, and this is widely considered by a lot of people to be one of the best kids games ever made. That being said, it was out of print by the time I was in the hobby and trying to get games, and so I never actually had the chance to play Chicken Cha Cha Cha. I just know it by reputation. Have you played that one, or is that one that you took a
No.
pass on?
Yeah, no, I know nothing about that.
Okay, all right. Well, I know my friend Justin, who's been on the show a few times, has a lot of experience with it. So maybe the next time I have him on, we'll do a little Chicken Cha Cha Cha. I was also thinking about maybe doing an episode on kids games at some point, because I have
Right,
played
yeah.
a lot of kids games, and I think it might be fun to kind of review some of those. But that's neither here nor there. One of the last ones that I want to talk about here is Lowenhertz, and I'm basically going to talk about this one as a nod to frequent guest Joel Eddy on the show, because I know that's one of his favorite games. It's one of the earliest games that he played, and he absolutely loved it. He's actually talked about it quite a bit. I was curious to kind of do a comparison based on what he said about it, and if you had any impressions of Lowenhertz.
Yeah, so this is one that I've only played once, and I think I acquired it in a trade as it wasn't the main thing I was trading for. I played it once, and then I ended up trading away, and I kind of regretted it because thinking back to it, I think it probably fits quite well with my taste. I think maybe at the time I had it, I was learning so many games then, and it just didn't make much of an impression. But thinking back to it, I'd like to give it more of a chance, I think, and have another go at it because it's one of those early Euro games that are actually quite confrontational and aggressive, and it has this quite interesting bidding for the actions. I can't remember exactly how it works, but you turn up a card which has various different actions on it, and the players compete over who's going to get which of those actions, and then on the board there you're kind of expanding your territory with these little walls which divide sections that the different players own, and you can take over other players' land. And yeah, I mean, I like all that stuff of the confrontation and the aggressive Euros. So yeah, I'm kind of sad that I let that one go. I'd definitely give it another try if I got the chance.
Right, yeah, I think it's kind of got that mixture of that sort of bidding, auction, and then also that area enclosure.
Right.
More so than area control, more of an area enclosure game, and the mechanisms you're talking about are exactly what Joel liked about it as well. Sort of the bidding for that action, that you're going to try and take, and it sounds like again you bring up that confrontational nature of the game, and I think that is something that you find in earlier Euros that you. We kind of like seem to have moved away from as time went by. I think about games that are like El Grande, which I think came out in 1995.
Yeah.
And that game is tremendously in your face. Just direct messing with each other and all sorts of nasty tricks. And so I do find it interesting that we kind of got away from that in a lot of designs, more towards that dreaded words, multiplayer solitaire.
Yeah.
And now we seem to be kind of merging what people would call Ameritrash kind of style games, thematic games, a little bit of luck, some dice rolling, chit pulling, whatever, with kind of Eurogame mechanisms and sensibilities, and now kind of getting back into direct confrontation and interaction as being something that's desirable now. So everything old is new again.
Yeah.
The last one I wanted to bring up was Twilight Imperium. This looks like the year that the first edition, if BGG is correct here, of Twilight Imperium was released. Now, I have never played this, but I kind of feel you have to give it a nod as one of the first of those huge, epic sort of 4X games that really, I mean, it's still in print today. It's in its third edition. Immensely popular. I've only actually been able to play the third edition game, I think maybe 2 or 3 times, but every single time was very memorable. Did you ever have a chance to play any of the editions of Twilight and Imperium? And if so, what were your impressions?
No.
No?
No, this is not really. I mean, it's just not really my kind of thing. A game that lasts multiple hours. The theme
7,
doesn't really do much for
8.
me. Yeah, so no, I've seen it. I've seen it being played.
It doesn't do much.
Like one giant table.
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
Not Martin
thing.
Speed, huh? Well, I can tell you that it's one of those games that if you ever get the chance to play it, I think you should probably play it once, just so that you can say you've done it. People say that about Arkham Horror. They say that about Advanced Civilization. There's certain games, almost like a gamer's to-do list, and I kind of feel that this is one of them, just because it's so unique and so immersive, and so huge and so long that you kind of come out of it feeling like you really have been through something, and you have a story to tell, which is really interesting. I think probably one of the only Euro games that has ever really given me that feeling is probably Dominant Species. When you play that game, by the time you're done, you're very drained, and it's been just this long immersive experience, and you probably have a story or two to tell. But that one only takes about 3 hours as opposed to the 7 or 8 hours that Twilight Imperium can take.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I agree with you that it's a long one, but I think it's one that's worth sort of investigating if you ever have the opportunity. Even if it isn't quite your style, I would still
Sure.
recommend it.
Oh, the only one that we haven't mentioned, which I would definitely like to give a shout out to from 1997, is Zendo.
Ah, Zendo, yes.
Yeah, which I think is a fantastic game because it's so different from most games. The idea of it being that you have a master who creates a rule and then depicts sort of arrangements of ice house pieces, the little coloured pyramids, which fits his rule and one which doesn't fit his rule, and then his students have to construct their own patterns and ask for them to be judged and gradually try and figure out this rule. It's a really interesting experience, I think, quite unlike anything we'd normally call a board game. So I definitely recommend that to people to try.
Yeah, and I think that would be another game that would be very useful in the classroom.
Right.
In mathematics, where you're trying to get students to be able to find a rule, whether that rule is a graphical rule in a sort of pattern, or whether it's a numerical sort of rule. This would be another way to sort of introduce that idea in a game form, and that sort of logical, deductive reasoning as you sort of test and try out different combinations, different patterns.
Yeah, it's pretty much the game of the scientific method, I think. So yeah, it's pretty cool.
Well, that sounds fascinating. I haven't had a chance to play it, but I'll definitely make a little note because it might be one I can bring into the classroom in the future. So
yeah, and the sort of boxed version of the board game has long been out of print, but you don't even, you can pick up ice house pieces and you can get the rules online. You don't even have to use those on the forums on BGG. People play it with emoticons. You could play it with pretty much anything, really. So yeah, definitely worth checking out.
Well, that sounds interesting. Well, thank you for that tip, and maybe you can cobble together something like you said to be able to play the game. Hopefully, the rules are posted online, and
yeah.
I could maybe get a shot at that. So, well, thank you very much for that tip. There were a couple other abstracts in there. I don't want people to think I hate abstracts. It's just I think was it Zertz, I think, or one of the other ones was on there as well. I just have no experience with those. Are there any others in that sort of abstract sort of field you would like to talk about at all before we leave this?
No, I think we pretty much covered the ones I've played that I really like from 1997. So let's move on.
All right, so leaving 1997 in the past and waving goodbye to one of Martin's favorites, Tigris and Euphrates, we're going to move forward to the year 2012. And this is the year that Phil Eklund finally released a game that I can play. However, I needed help to play it, and as a matter of fact, I got that help from you. I've written about it a couple of times on various different geek lists, trying desperately to see if I can get Mr. Eklund's attention in some way to get him to reconsider how he puts his rules together and how games are presented, because this game, Pax Porfiriana, is one of the most fascinating games I've played in a long, long time. It is a re-implementation in some ways of his game Lords of the Sierra Madre, and that was a board game, and this game is entirely driven by cards, and yet it is a very, very deep game. It is a game with just tons of historical flavor. Every card, I believe, is unique, and there are tons of cards in this game, of which you only use a fraction. Many in my play group, Martin, have compared this to something like a Glory to Rome or Innovation, in that it is card-driven, and you are looking for combinations of cards that are going to perhaps work together, and it's also a game that is about trying to wrangle the game state in your favor. An innovation, for example, you're trying to find a way where you can have the hammer in your hand, beat up on your opponents while you score a bunch of points and claim a bunch of achievements. In Pax Porfiriana, it's very much about trying to gain sort of a lot of influence in one of these key areas that we'll discuss later, and then subtly trying to manipulate the government into a position where you can then try to take over the country. So both of the games seem to share some things maybe in common in feel. I'd be curious what your reactions are to that. But before we do that, can you just tell me a little bit about where you heard about the game, what your first exposure to it was, what caught your interest, all of the usual questions that I like to ask of a guest at the start?
Yeah, absolutely. So I had come across a few Phil Eklund games. I think the only ones I'd played, I guess like a year and a half ago, wherever I'd played Bios Megafauna and I'd played High Frontier. And I kind of enjoyed them. I really found them so ambitious and interesting and different and full of ideas. And there was this, High Frontier's got all this crazy. Well, both of them have all this science in them, and obviously loads of research has gone into them. And I thought that was really cool. There was so much to like about that, but the games themselves didn't work quite so well as games for me as they did as experiences. I enjoyed my time playing them, but they just weren't quite there for me. And the rules, yeah, pretty difficult to get into for those games as well. I remember just finding it so difficult to do anything in High Frontier, and having this game where I felt like I'd for hours just been trying to launch something into space, and we were all helping each other out. We were kind of we can do this, and I mean it's a great experience. It's very memorable, but not quite delivering as a game for me. And then I think it must have been in one of the Essen previews probably on Board Game Geek News, something like that. I saw his next game was going to be this one, Pax Porfiriana. It was going to be out at Essen 2012, which was the first and so far only Essen that I've attended. So I put it on my list of things maybe I would check out. But at that point, I wasn't super excited about the theme of the game. I didn't really know anything about this episode of history, which is the Mexican Revolution. And having been kind of a little bit, having enjoyed those other Eglin games I played, but not being quite convinced I needed to own them or would want to play them that much, I was a little wary to go for this one, even though it was quite reasonably priced. So right. I was kind of tempted. And then I got to Essen. It was, I think, in the hotel a couple of days in. One of my good friends who was there as well had picked up a copy from the Sierra Madre stall in the halls, and he wanted to try it out. So we kind of thought, okay, we'll figure this out together. We deciphered that crazy rule book, which was an experience in itself. Getting kind of 2/3 of the way through reading the rulebook, and then we're like, wait, there are victory points in this game. These haven't been mentioned before. We managed to just about piece it together. We played a game, and we were just both, I think, really engrossed by it, and thought, wow, this seems really cool. We don't quite know what's happening. We don't quite understand all the rules, but we want to play again right now. So we played again. I think I taught someone else later that evening. The next day, when I went back down to the halls, I bought my own copy because I really wanted to try it some more. I played it a bunch. I mean, I played this game, I think, more than anyone more than anyone else has logged on BGG for sure. I've played it almost 40 times now, which for a pretty complex, fairly long game, 40 times in a year is pretty huge for me anyway. So yeah, I mean, we're going to talk a lot more about why I like it so much, but I think just a fantastic game, and it really has that whole experience thing I was talking about with the other Eklund games I played. It has this amazing narrative and all this research and all this detail, but it really works as a game too, and it's really competitive. And yeah, I mean, it's fantastic.
I would have to agree with you. There's just something that's very unique about this game, and I was drawn to it, oddly enough, because of the theme. I had done a lot of reading and research years ago into the history of Mexico and the Mexican revolutions. There were so many of them. The country was just rocked by upheaval all the time, it seemed. I think at one point I counted there was something like 6 or 7 sort of distinct kind of rebellions and revolutions and changes of government in a very short period of time. And so I had a little bit of knowledge of the history. It kind of, sparked my memory a little bit, and I was fascinated by it. But then as I, looked at the game and started flipping through the cards and seeing all of these sort of details and things that I remembered from my readings and from all of the sort of things that I had learned throughout the years about Mexican history and Mexican American history, I was really even more fascinated. But so I took a shot at it, and I got it, and almost immediately just stumbled mightily with the rule book. Now, I had played and bought a few other of Phil Eklund's games, including Origins, because of the theme. I was fascinated by that. This is a story about developing your species and your brain, and oh my goodness, what an amazing sort of game and ideas. I love evolutionary science. I thought, oh, this is going to be fantastic, and just could not for the life of me parse that rule book out. Spent a while with a gentleman who was very kind online, and he basically taught me the game, and I kind of had it in my brain. It was there, but I didn't have the chance to play it right away. And then a few weeks later, when I finally had the chance to do it, I had forgotten too much, and I was just like, all right, this just isn't going to happen for me. So sadly, I ended up trading it. My next experience was with Bios Megafauna, and pretty much the same thing. Loved the theme, loved the idea, could not comprehend the rule book. Then I went to the sort of website with the living rules, and that didn't help. That actually confused me even more. And I was like, that's when I started getting a little angry. And angry, not necessarily total nerd rage, but a little angry because I understood enough at what I was looking at to know that there was something unique here. I understood that there was something special here, but I was a little upset that everything was so obtuse and so opaque that I just really didn't feel that I was being given a fair shot to actually get a chance to play this game. And that was kind of the first time I wrote on BGG a sort of open letter to Phil Eklund and saying, look, love your stuff, love your ideas. I love the themes you try to tackle, but, please stop assuming that all of us are PhDs in, biology and natural history. We have some knowledge. Those of us who buy your games are interested in those topics, but, we're not really where you are. And so these things need to be explained. And perhaps, have someone else look at your rule books, and someone else who isn't from that scientific world write the rules in consultation with you, so that a regular, average, normal, intelligent person can then get the chance to experience the games. Because I remember being very frustrated by that. So I'm going to kind of put that out there again on this podcast and say, please just get yourself someone who could work with you, an outside rules editor, writer, graphic designer, somebody who can make these games accessible. Because, as you said, it's so much work to figure out even how to play. And then often the games are quite long that you may never get to have that experience more than once or twice unless you totally dedicate yourself to that game. And that's one of the things about PAX that worked for me, because after about an hour with you on a Skype call, you were nice enough to guide me through the game and basically teach me the game. And again, I'm going to attribute that quote to you that I find so fantastic, which is, The rule book is a fantastic reference while you're playing the game, but don't ever try to learn it from the rule book.
Yeah.
And I find that to be 100% true. The rulebook actually is quite good once you actually know the game, but it's horrible at teaching you the game. But the thing about PAX that was different for me was that this was a game that could be played in a reasonable amount of time. So it stood a much better chance of getting repeated plays. Now, I haven't logged all of my plays. I'm not really good about logging my plays, but I know I have played this game at least 15 to 20 times, at least. And there would be no way I could ever say that about any of his other games. This one is, short enough that I can play it multiple times in the same evening if people want to play it. And so consequently, the game mechanics become much more fluid, things become much clearer, and it's much more approachable for me, and I feel much more confident in teaching the game to others than I ever would have been with any other Phil Eklund title. So, I think that the theme attracted me, and then the fact that this was sort of a reasonable playtime game also really worked for me personally. So, thanks for sharing your thoughts on what it was that attracted you to it, and I'm glad you finally got to go to Essen. I wasn't aware that was your only time there. I hope to go someday, but haven't had the chance yet. So was it as crazy as everybody says?
Yeah, it was. I mean, it's insane. It's such a huge event and so crowded. But yeah, I had a great time. There was a whole bunch of us went from London on board. We were all staying in the same hotel, and we could game there in the evenings. And yeah, it was a blast.
That's fantastic, and that really is a great way to do it. To go with friends and get to spend time together and cram yourselves into a hotel room. That's the way to do it. So. Now, getting back to PAX here, let's give a few of the basic stats before we move on. This is a game for 1 to 5 players. The playing time is listed at about 120 minutes, but I find the game usually can be over in an hour to an hour and a half. I've seen games go more quickly than that, even under an hour, but that's usually because someone at the table is new and doesn't really understand what they're doing. And so the game can end a little more quickly that way. The game is listed as 12 and up. I would say that's definitely true. This is a rather dense game in that the cards all are unique. And so there's a lot of reading that has to happen in this game. So if you're looking to get this game, this is not one that's going to be light on reading. Every card is going to have something that might be a little bit different about it, something that might be a little unique that you really have to pay attention to. And then there's also lots of sort of color coding. The cards all come in these various colors that are indicative of the type of card they might be. Whether it's an enterprise card that is going to make you money, say like a plantation or a mine or a bank or a gun store or something of that nature. Or it could be a black card, which are usually kind of attack cards, assassination cards. Orange cards, which I kind of like to call sort of unrest cards, where you're stirring up the locals and causing trouble and bandits and revolts and things of that nature. And then you have a huge array of what are called partner cards that come in all different kinds of colors, sort of based on their affiliation. For example, there are some partner cards that are sort of that are based on people and events and things that happen from United States intervention and involvement, and those I think are often color-coded blue, if I'm remembering correctly.
Right.
And then you also have sort of the local Mexican sort of cards, which are either going to come from the Sonoran sort of province or the Chihuahuan provinces. And so there's all these different kinds of cards. There's troop cards. There's partner cards that will give you some sort of a bonus. Those are the ones I was just talking about. And then everyone in addition has their own hacendado card, which is sort of your role in the game. You're a very famous Mexican landowner invested in the country, and you are either going to go to victory by supporting Porfiriana Diaz and trying to extend his regime, in which case you will be rewarded for your loyalty, and whoever has the most money at the end of the game wins. Or at a key moment, you will turn your back on him and go for some sort of a coup of his government, which can take a variety of different forms, and we'll talk about those more later, where you will then win the game outright because you were able to oust Diaz from control, and you are now the new ruler of Mexico. So there's just a ton going on in this game, and so it can be a little overwhelming at first when you're looking at it and learning it. And as if all of that wasn't enough, Martin, the other thing that I found really unique about this game is it is, just like I was talking about before, a punch your neighbor in the face game.
Yeah.
There's just tons of, I'm going to steal from you. Oh, look, you have a beautiful mine. Why don't I send my troops over to, you can't see my air quotes, help your mine, keep it safe. And so, yeah, we're just going to hang out here and keep everything safe. But by the way, we need a little bit of money. So you're extorting from other people's businesses. You can go and cause unrest and shut them down, and then they have to send their own troops in to quell the riots, or take police actions and slowly, get things back under control. But until then, you get to laugh as they make no income from their huge enterprises that they usually make tons of money on. You can assassinate each other's partner cards. You can do so many different things. You can build each other's transportation networks. One of the things that people do is they'll build a ranch or a plantation or something, and the way that you get to it across the countryside might be by horseback or by foot or by mule. And then, there's usually an icon on the card that says, oh, but, you could build a railroad that would go to this brand new, beautiful plantation. And so if I build your railroad, that's going to give me income. So you own the plantation, but I own the railroad. And so there's all of these ways that you can interact. So the game becomes a game in which you really, much like innovation, again, I'm going to draw that parallel, you have to pay attention to what everybody else is doing in order to play the game well. So you take all that, you throw it into one card game, which is kind of crazy to think that a card game can do all this, and you end up with something that's truly unique and special. So that's kind of my kind of overview of the game. What did I miss there, Martin? Because I was trying to do a good job, because you're the one that taught me.
Oh, I think that was a great overview, Jeff. I think you covered most of the bases there. I mean, I totally agree with your comparisons to innovation. I think quite often the people who I've come across who really love Pax Porfiriana also really enjoy innovation, because it has that kind of improvisation feel to it. You're down, everyone's stomping on you, and then suddenly you think of something, you find some card that can flip it all on its head, and you're back in the game. And it's tactical. It has all these, you can find these combinations you'd never thought of. But yeah, I mean, it's that's what I love about it. I think you've covered a lot of the different types of things that go on in the game, and all these different types of cards, and just these really ingenious ways that they interact with each other, and that you can pull something off that no one saw coming, and that's always something that I enjoy in a game.
So, one of the things that, again, I found really interesting in the game also were the headline cards and the sort of topple cards. So I'd like to talk about those for a minute. Basically, when you play this game, you're going to have an array of cards in front of you. There's going to be 12 cards that you are eligible to try to draft or purchase on your turn. And the cards range from costing you basically nothing to costing you, I think it's up to, 16 to buy a card. It's, 0, 2, 4, 8, 16, I think, right? Right. So, a card that has just been revealed is going to be quite expensive, but a card that's been on the playing field for a while is going to be rather cheap. And so as these cards flip up, people are going to be grabbing cards that they think are going to advance their sort of their agenda, their enterprises, or something that's going to synergize well with what they have. But then there's also these cards that are called the headline cards. And then there are cards that are called topple cards. And the thing that I find really interesting about the headline cards is that these are cards that can be purchased and immediately used rather than going into your hand. And they can have quite an interesting effect on other players. Some of them can be very damaging to other players, and some of them are kind of, maybe don't have much of an effect. You can also buy the card if you're worried about someone using it against you, and basically play it as it's what's called its status quo sort of side, where you're not going to use any of the effects that are listed on the card. But the point I'm trying to get to is actually this little stupid picture of either a bull or a bear in the upper corner of the card. And the way that this works is that if you ever get a card, if you ever get, I think, what is it, 2 cards, Martin, that show a bear, yes?
Yeah.
Then you're going to
right.
go into a depression. The country will go into a depression, and this is going to seriously affect everybody's ability to make money. And I found this really interesting because the reason I'm going on about it is because it opens up another element of this game, which is that sometimes there's actually cooperation among the players, where everybody sees these headline cards and they're sort of sliding down this card row as they get closer and closer, and people are looking and saying, okay, well, if you get a bear card, but then you get a bull card on top of it, it sort of cancels that bear, and we're all good. But if there's a bear card on top of that discard pile and another bear card goes on top, and it has its own discard pile, it's just the bear bull discard pile. So if you get 2 of those in a row, it's going to trash everybody's economy. Basically, anybody that has a mine or a bank is now going to produce nothing. And in addition to that, you actually have to pay $1 per turn for, I think, every card you have in front of you, or you have to start discarding cards that you had in play in front of you during this Great Depression. So I've actually seen it where players will start to negotiate over who's going to buy what headline card and at what cost in order to avoid throwing everybody into a depression. And then, as you said, there's that opportunity for surprise plays where someone might actually want that. Say they have plantations and what am I saying? Plantations and ranches, which are not affected by the depression, and they may just suddenly buy a card even though it's really expensive to throw everybody else into a depression, because that's going to improve the game state for them. So again, there's just a lot of layers and nuances here to these cards, which kind of can affect the economy. In addition, the headline cards will often sometimes change the government. And that's another thing that I wanted to bring up, which is that there are many different types of government that you can find yourself playing under. So you can play under what's called the Pax Porfiriana, which is the peace of Diaz, right? So everybody is, status quo. He brings peace and order. That's what he said. And he's free to give kickbacks to everybody who remains loyal to him. And that's actually a part of the game where you can actually receive extra income if you are showing yourself to be loyal to Diaz. However, governments change very quickly. The style of government can change. You can go to U.S. intervention, where it's actually going to boost the economy for everybody who has mines, but it's also going to open up some other problems if Diaz wants to stay in power, because it leads to outrage over this foreign influence and intervention. You can have the government switch to martial law, where martial law, the economy is suppressed to an extent. Things are not going to be as profitable as they were, but players who are constantly throwing you into unrest and playing nasty cards on your enterprises now are going to find it harder to disrupt you, because this large police and sort of troop presence is going to keep a lid on things. It makes it easier for the players to get rid of unrest and to keep functioning, even though they're not going to be making as much money. However, you give the military that much power, and now Diaz is possibly going to be in trouble for people who have more command of the troops, more command of the local law enforcement than he does. So he could become vulnerable in that way. And then finally you have anarchy, which is just everything goes crazy. The economy is basically tanked. And we're now looking at Diaz maybe being toppled by a revolution. So all of these governments sort of have their flip side. And all of these governments give different conditions that the players are going to have to operate under, which is something else that I find fascinating. So when these cards come down, these headline cards, often they will change the government as well as having that bear bull effect. Now, I tried to do a pretty good job of outlining that. Would you care to sort of explain? I gave you a little window there, Martin, as far as this U.S. intervention, outrage. Can you explain maybe how toppling works? Because that is one of the more interesting parts of the game and one of the win conditions.
Sure, and actually something that should have been right at the front of the rulebook, I think, rather than kind of buried in subsection K7B or wherever it was. But because one of the main ways of winning the game is there are these 4 cards. They're shuffled into the deck, but it's one of these where you do a kind of structured deck at the beginning. So you have the deck in 6 piles. The top 2 have no topple card. The next 4 each have a topple card shuffled into them. So you know that after a little bit of a period of stability, relative stability, to get your tableau up and running, you are going to be hit with these fairly regular topple cards coming out. And those topple cards are the opportunities for a player to overthrow Yaz and win the game immediately. So there are 4 chances. If by the time the 4th topple comes up, no one manages to win in that way, then the richest player wins, as you said before. But so on each of these topple cards, it's going to depend on the current regime, the current style of government, as to how you can topple the Yaz. So if we're in the US intervention regime, you're going to need outrage points to topple the Yaz and so on. But the interesting thing is that in order to win, you have to buy the topple card during the right regime, and then you compare your score. Say it's US intervention, so I have my outrage points. I compare those. Diaz gets a certain number of outrage points as his own defense, but then I also have to beat the other players' totals in outrage. So I would have to have more than, like, say, 2 or 3 more outrage points than the other players combined in a 3-player game. It works slightly differently with more players, but the basic idea is that you're fighting against the other players, and you need to have more of this, whichever type of point is the right one to overthrow Diaz at that moment. So that can lead to some quite interesting dynamics, where one of the other things that we haven't mentioned yet that's really cool about the game is that although you said there are all these attack cards and there are all these things you can hit other players with, very, very often those award points to the player that gets hit as compensation. It's called victim awarded prestige. So I steal something from you and I trash your ranch, but your people are now angry, so you get an outrage point to save, and that will, that could help you win later on. So there's this fine balance between whether you want to hit someone because it might give them a point that you don't really want to give them, and you can do this cool thing of playing cards on yourself in this kind of Machiavellian way, where you trash your own stuff just to get the points, and there's all these fun plays like that. But I think the way that interacts with the toppling is really interesting, especially with more than 2 players, because say the player to my left is looking really strong in outrage and he's looking like he might win soon. I can hit the 3rd player with a card. I get the immediate benefit of stealing from him or whatever else the card does, but also I can give him an outrage point, which is then going to make it harder for the other player to win, because he's got more outrage up against him when that toppling opportunity comes up. So this is really cool when you can play these cards and screw multiple people at once. I think that's my favorite kind of play in this game.
Yeah, I would agree. That and the play you described before, which I believe in the rulebook he refers to as the straw man play, which is where you basically attack yourself. in order to build yourself up. So, real quickly, I just want to sort of review quickly these points we're talking about. Many of the cards have a little oval in them, and I always tell people I'm teaching, the ovals are really the heart of the game.
Yeah.
This is really what the game's all about. And different cards will have different words in these ovals. And it's either going to be revolution or outrage or loyalty. And I'm drawing a blank on the last one. Command. Thank you very much. And it's going to be one of those. And so a large portion of what you're trying to do in the game is you're trying to sort of see if you can get a clear numerical advantage in a certain type of those points, those features, whatever you want to call them, whether it's revolution or command or whatnot, so that when the time is right, you can try to use that to topple Diaz. Because as you said, in a 3 or 4 or 5 player game, Diaz has a default strength of 2 in everything, and you must beat him. 2 is not enough. You have to do more. And then coupled with Diaz is going to be the points in, whatever it happens to be, outrage or revolution, of the 2 other players weakest in that type of influence. Right. So you don't have to beat the guy who has tons of outrage if you're going for an outrage win, because he's got more even than you. His doesn't count. It's, Diaz is 2, and the other player over there who you noticed only has 1 lousy little outrage point. And so Diaz's total is 3, you've got 4, and, you might actually be able to pull this off and win the game, depending on what players do with their Hacendado cards, which we can cover later. So it really is, again, it's a really interesting mechanic where it makes everybody have to pay attention to everybody, as you said, and kind of decide who are you going to give those points to, those ovals to, because that really can, you can end up giving someone the game if you're not careful. That being said, there's also a little bit of randomness that has to be acknowledged in this game that can bite you. And, if the first set of cards coming out in the tableau in that central area where you can draft cards, you see 2, 3 revolution cards, you're like, look at that. I can try and scoop up some revolution cards, get some revolution points. Later in the game, I'll buy the church, and that'll give me another revolution point. We haven't talked about that yet either. And my Hacendado card on his back reverse side, he's got a revolution point. I'm going to go revolution. And so you invest a lot of money, a lot of time in strategizing and trying to gain these revolution points. But you know what? Those 5 cards that came out in the first couple displays that had all those nice, tasty revolution points, those are the only ones in the game. And so, it's one of the great strengths of the game and a weakness. I think I have to say it's a weakness because the game has many more cards. I'm not talking 20 or 30. I'm talking usually over 100 cards that you will not use when you play. And so there's an almost infinite variety there just in this little box, this ridiculous, stupid little box of cards. There's a ton of replayability and variety there. But at the same time, you can kind of get hosed if, just randomly by chance, the way that deck was constructed, the way it was shuffled, there's no more of those revolution cards in there no matter what you do. And so that's the one thing that I wish there was something that could be done about, but I don't really see how that could have been changed. So have you ever seen that be a problem, or is that just the couple of times I've noticed it?
Yeah, I don't think it's a problem. I mean, yeah, it's a card game. Sometimes the draw's gonna screw you a bit, but I think there are enough cards of the different types that usually you're going to see, a reasonable number of each. I can't recall just not being able to do what I wanted to do at all. And there are these, as you sort of briefly mentioned, there are a couple of cards called public cards, which are always available for everyone to buy as well. They're very expensive, but they're always going to be available. So there's always a point you can get that way. Yeah, I mean, the cards can be rough sometimes, but I think that's totally worth it for that crazy variability and never knowing how the game's going to turn out.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I would agree with you. Otherwise, I wouldn't be such a big fan of the game. But I do
Yeah.
know that that would bother some people. So I wanted to kind of bring that out and just say, look, you could occasionally have that happen to you. The scenario that I described with revolution points is exactly what happened to my friend Zach when he was playing the game. He just never really had the opportunity to get more revolution points, and so therefore wasn't able to kind of beef himself up.
Yeah, so do
Um,
something
you
else.
know, right? Yes, but Lloyd and I were taking all of the other cards. I was going for command, and Lloyd was going for loyalty, and so
Yeah.
all of these things, and then that kind of ended up diluting the outrage, and so yeah. But I mean, it's a fascinating kind of a system, and the interesting thing too about those topple cards is when a topple card comes up, whatever the government is at the time, you're going to flip the card to see which of those points, which of those ovals, those areas, whatever you want to call them, is going to be used in the topple. So on the other side of martial law is command, on the other side of anarchy is revolution. And you can institute a topple regardless. If you buy that topple card, you can try and perform a topple. But every topple card also has a bonus. And this I absolutely love to try to maneuver and manipulate. It's very hard to do sometimes, but you can. And that's where the topple card will give you a bonus. It'll say something like, if the government is in martial law, -1 to Diaz command. And so if I use that topple card when we're under Pax, I'm not going to get that bonus. It's just going to be, all right, we're in the Pax government. It's my loyalty against everybody, against Porfiriana and the two lowest players. Let's see who wins. But if I can manage to do it when the government is in the right form, that's going to knock Porfiriana down a peg and give me an even better opportunity to try to win. And I often find that trying to manipulate that government, keeping a card in your hand, that oftentimes it's a troop card. You play a troop card, and often it leads immediately to martial law. You play an attack card, and almost immediately some of them will lead to revolution. And so you can flip that government right before you buy that topple card, and it can mean the difference between winning and losing. Have you seen that strategy kind of used before, or do you think
Oh
maybe?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you're generally from fairly early on, you're going to think about going down one of these four routes, lining yourself up with a few points of one particular type so that you're ready to strike. But then you need to have a card in your hand that can get the regime to the type you want. So if you're building up revolution, you want to be holding something that can throw the regime into anarchy, so that you can play that right away by the topple and win the game, because you get 3 actions per turn in this game, and that never seems to be enough.
No.
When it comes up to when the topple card comes up, I always get this feeling like I can do this, I can win this time, and then I calculate it out, and I'm 1 action short, or I'm $1 short, or I'm just short of something. And you really need to sort of get as many pieces in place as possible, and have the other pieces you need ready and waiting in your hand, because you've got to strike within 1 turn when that topple comes out before anyone can do anything about it. So yeah, definitely saving up those cards that give you the regime change can be huge.
Yeah, I find that to be, fascinating, the 3 action thing, like you said, because in many ways it sort of telegraphs. You can't help but telegraph what you're going for. If people are paying attention and they see you collecting all these revolution points, and then a topple card comes up, one of the first thing that the other players are going to try to do is move the government back out of anarchy towards anything else. And that's where having that card as a little ace in the hole, where you're going to be able to just play that to flip that government back no matter what the other players do, can sometimes be just an amazing key to victory. And I've had games where I've basically held on to one card for expressly that purpose for like 3/4 of the game, just hoping that I would get the opportunity to use it at a key moment. But again, you also have to be able to pay the cost of the card, which is also, as you mentioned, you might be $1 short. And so, a day late, $1 short, it's not going to happen for you. And I find that to be
Yeah.
a lot of tension as well. While we're talking strategies to this game, I've often found that people, for whatever reason, at least the ones I played with, maybe it's just my group, but I find that people have a tendency to ignore those public cards. And I have won on a couple of occasions just by snagging one of those public cards and then instituting a topple because it gives me that extra point that I needed in whatever it happens to be. Do you find that people overlook those public cards, or is that just my group?
We've got to. I mean, probably mostly have played this game two player, even though I know before I said some of the interesting dynamics only really open up with more than two. But I had a really regular opponent I played it with a lot two player, and we definitely got to make big use of those public cards. We got to learn how important they were, and actually would often end up buying it. They're double-sided, the public cards,
Yes.
so I might end up buying one on the other side just to deny my opponent from getting it the next turn on the side he wants to use it. The one that seems to get used a lot is the Teddy Roosevelt card, which changes it changes the regime to US intervention, and it gives you an outrage point. So
Right.
It's like a double whammy if you're going for that particular toppling condition. So I've found myself buying out the other side of that just to deny it to my opponent. I mean, they're expensive. That's the thing, and money can be really tight in this game. Or not. That's the thing. That's another thing that's interesting about it. The economy, you know, we talked about the depressions. If you get a depression early on, then money can be so tight, and you feel like you never even have $4 or $5 to rub together to buy anything. And other games, the economy is really booming, and everyone has these. There are a lot of the enterprise cards which earn you money, and there's a ton of money flowing around, and you can buy these public cards easily, and you can buy cards from way up at the top of the card market, and it has a very different feel then. So the public cards become more of a factor then, because they're more easily obtainable by everyone. I mean, some games you never have $16 or $18 in the whole game, so they're not going to be a factor. But
That's true. That's true. And I'm glad that you sort of pointed out the changes and the differences in economy from game to game, because it is. It's quite true. I'd also like to spend a moment, if you don't mind, sort of talking about some of the thematic connections that I've found between the cards and gameplay. There's just some really clever things here that I think Mr. Eklund and I believe it's his son, isn't it? His son, I think, that also did this game with him. I think they really deserve a lot of credit. For example, if I own a gun store as one of my enterprises, then anytime somebody plays a sort of robbery or bandit action or something of that nature, I actually am going to make some profit from that, because it kind of thematically works. Well, they had to get the guns from somewhere, so they got them from you, maybe, right? I love the fact that you can expand your haciendas and your ranches. You can expand, your plantations and your ranches. You can expand the land for those. So there's a very neat little tidy system whereby you can increase the income that's generated by your plantations or your ranches simply by paying a cost that will allow you to add another marker to the card, which adds more income to you. And so you have this vision in your head of this expanding, huge ranch, and more land being fenced in and used. And so it works very thematically to me. I've already mentioned the sort of tie between the mines and U.S. intervention. When you have the United States more sort of meddling and involved and flushing their capital into the Mexican system, it's going to create more money for people who have mines and banks and things of that nature. So I think that's really another interesting thematic tie-in. There's a whole bunch more I could talk about, but I'd be curious if you found any thematic tie-ins that you really enjoy.
Yeah, I mean, just looking at the cards, I just took them out of the box now, and just there's just so much thematic detail on every single one of these cards, and there's they each maybe have 3 or 4 different images on there, and you have these headline cards where there's a whole picture of a newspaper front page, and it gives you a headline and a story, and there's the cards are really busy. There's a whole bunch of there's a whole bunch of game related stuff, all these icons and different values and stuff like that. But there's also on each of these cards, there's several lines of flavor text just telling you a bit more about the history. And every time you look at these cards and read them, you just realize how many stories there were in this period, and it just makes you want to go and find out more about it. And I haven't even, I don't think, read all these cards, because I get so engrossed when I'm playing the game and thinking about how I'm going to manipulate the cards to my advantage. I don't have time to read the flavor text, but it's just so much detail. It's so cool.
Yeah, and many of them stand out to you. Like you mentioned the Teddy Roosevelt card. I think of the Yaqui Slave Revolt card, and all of these just really different thematic things that really do sort of entice you to learn a little bit more about the history and look into it a little more. And I think that that's always a great thing when a game can not only provide you with a great experience, something that's fun to play and fun to enjoy and pass the time with your friends, but also something that might spur you to learn, a little bit of something new. I think about games like Navajo Wars, which I just picked up from GMT, and because of anticipating that game coming to me, I picked up a book called Blood and Thunder, which was all about the sort of forced relocation of the Navajo to reservations and the story of Kit Carson and other very famous kind of people of that American frontier West sort of history. And so, the game actually inspired me to learn a little bit more about that particular time period. And I always think that that's a great side benefit. So I really do appreciate what you're sharing about, the flavor text on the cards. You might not have time during the game sometimes, but often you'll flip through those cards at the end of the game as you're talking about, and you'll be like, wow, I wonder what this was all about. And it opens up a whole nother door for you.
Yeah, I'm looking at a card here, the froth flotation patent. It's just cool stuff like that. This is a technology that improves the mines. So that's what in the game, it will mean that your mines always have a better income rather than varying with the regime. But, you've got this little diagram of a froth flotation cell, and it tells you all about this guy John Callow who introduced this ore processing technology and all these details. It's just really cool.
Yeah, and that level of research is one of the things that has always drawn me to games by Phil Eklund, and another reason that I have consistently kind of been, like I said, just a little upset, like wishing that somehow these games could be made a little bit more accessible, because there's so much in them. There's so much to learn from them, and yet there is a game there that you can play. But sometimes getting across that barrier can be too great for some people, me included, and you might not get to have the experience at all. So this is another reason I was very excited about this, and I'm hoping that in the future he and his son may decide to produce more games in this kind of PAX kind of line, and
yeah, that's actually that's in progress. I think the next one lined up is Pax Renaissance, which is going to be set in the European Renaissance kind of trading empires, and a guy I know on BGG, Cole, I don't know how exactly you pronounce his surname, Cole Wehrle, Wehrle it is. I met him this summer, and he came up with the initial idea for it, and now the Eklunds are developing it, and the way the game works with the card market and all the different types of events, I think is really well set up to be adapted to different themes, and it'll be really cool to see what happens with that.
Yeah, absolutely. I would be very curious and excited to hear of other games maybe that would use this engine. There have been some games that have come down the line recently that almost seem to be a system. You look at Commands and Colors. You look at the Coin series by Volko Ruhnke for Andean Abyss and Cuba Libre, and that's a whole sort of system that he's sort of come up with there. And so this might be another interesting system that we could have some other kind of games that are spinning off from, which once again would reduce that barrier to entry, because if you're familiar with one, it gives you a leg up on the next one. So I think that would be fantastic. So, well, Martin, before we kind of leave Pax Porfiriana behind here, is there anything else that we haven't covered that you would like to talk about or find interesting or compelling that makes this one of your new favorite games? Because I don't think I'm overstating that here. I think you have gone on record as saying this is one that is one of your favorites, and it's one that you are very eager to. I don't know what the word is, but you're very evangelical about this game.
Yeah.
You're always willing to talk to people about it. Proselytize might be the word.
Yeah.
So what would you say to that?
Yeah, I mean, this was, like I said, I played it at Essen, having kind of decided I probably didn't need to buy it, and then just got so engrossed in it straight away, got my copy, tried to get everyone who I could playing it. I mean, this game isn't for everyone, but I've introduced it to a lot of people. After about 20 plays, went into my top 10 games. I rate it a 10, and yeah, I mean, we've talked about a lot of the reasons for that. I think it is, having said earlier in this show that I'm more of a fan of the simple and elegant games. That might seem contradictory with this game, which is so kind of complex and intricate. But I think it's because that complexity is in service of something, which is this amazing story and this amazing theme and all this amazing detail in the cards, that I'm fine with the complexity when it's for a reason like that. It's not just complexity for the sake of it. So I think that's something to say about it, definitely. And just the way it has all these interlocking parts. I know we slammed the rule book, but when you think about the way everything relates to everything else in this game, and there's an economic system, there's a transport system, there's a military system, there's a political system, they're all interweaved with each other, and yet they're all represented by cards,
right?
Just cards. I mean, that's just such a cool thing. And actually, I kind of thought about how would I rewrite the rulebook if I was going to, and I'm sure there must be a better way, but it's not easy to see how you would do it and where the best place to start is, because you start trying to explain one system and then you realize that actually that relies on knowing this, and this, which you weren't planning to explain till later. And so it's a tough game to teach, and I don't really enjoy having to teach it. It's good once you have a few people who know it really well and you can just get started and get on with the game, because it's not an easy game to teach, definitely.
Right.
But yeah, it's just it's so worth it. It's and that's why I've spent so much time and effort singing about it on BGG and trying to convince people to give it a chance, because I just think it's I think it is an amazing achievement and one of the best games in the past few years, for sure.
Yeah, I think I would have to agree with you. It is ambitious in scope. It is complex, and yet once you know the game, is relatively easy to play. You have 3 actions. You refresh the card row, you collect your income, and you move on. It's not complex in the sort of the things that you have to do in order to play the game, but the decisions are extremely complex.
Yeah.
And the fact that the landscape changes every time you play the game makes it complex. And I would also argue that this game, even though it's cards, is extremely thematic. At least to my mind, it's extraordinarily thematic, because I am this person, this hacendado. These are my holdings. This is what I do. these are my mines, my plantations. These are the dirty tricks I'm going to use to advance my own cause. Meanwhile, I see the same story being played out with the other players, and all of us are kind of smiling and nodding to Diaz while it suits our needs, and then getting ready to stab him in the back at the first opportunity. And who's going to declare themselves for Diaz, who isn't. There's other mechanics in the game we haven't even mentioned, like flipping your Hacendado card. When you institute a topple, the other players, not you, first have to decide if you're going to flip your Hacendado card. And when you do that, then you choose, am I going to orient it towards outrage, or am I going to orient it towards revolution, or am I going to orient it towards, your choices might be command and loyalty. And so you have to make a choice at that point. And then once you've declared yourself, then you sort of lose what's called your base income off your Hacendado card, which gives you a little bit of a hit. So I've actually seen people institute a topple with almost no intention of really trying to win it, but trying to force the other players to flip. And so there's just so many different layers to this game. And again, it all feels very thematic to me. Sadly, the sort of corruption and chaos that was part of the history of Mexico at that time, the haves and the have-nots, and the way people had to work and survive, and all of these other players on the scene kind of manipulating events in their country, and whether they be their own countrymen or people, foreigners, like, U.S. involvement. It's a really interesting game, and it always tells a fascinating story. So I just wanted to throw that last piece in there, that I feel that, I would consider this game to be very thematic.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
And something else that I think makes it exceptional. So, well, Martin, I appreciate you taking the time to talk with me about this, because I've wanted to do this episode with you ever since you taught me the game, because if it wasn't for you, honestly, I don't know that I would have tried to learn it for the third time. I tried and failed twice, and I was very frustrated, but I had, kind of geek-mailed back and forth with you and seen some of your comments, and so I'm actually grateful, as are all of the people that I've introduced the game to. They're very grateful by proxy for teaching me this game. I've really only got one person who doesn't care for it, and that's my wife. Everybody else really seems to love it. And so I have taken my copy, and I've taken it to the next level I bought myself a beautiful cigar box.
Oh, nice.
For Mexican cigars. And so I keep all my cards and my pieces now in this nice wooden cigar box, and you open it up and you smell the tobacco, and it just makes it's just that last little piece for me.
Yeah, I have for mine, I have a baize playmat, like a green baize playmat, which has places marked out for the card market and the draw and discard piles and so on. This was actually a guy who has now become a gaming buddy where I'm living now in Bristol, Joe Berger. He designed and had this thing printed. And I think the thing that was kind of cool about this is he had 3 made, of which he has one. I bought one from him, and the other one, Matt Eklund bought and gave to Phil Eklund as a gift. So we have the 3 mats between us.
Nice.
Yeah,
that's a great story.
It just adds a little bit more to the to the atmosphere when you're playing it. When you kind of unroll this big cloth at the beginning of the game, it's pretty cool.
It sounds it. It sounds like it would be something that would really just kind of, again, add to that experience and add to that theme. So that sounds like it would be very cool to have, and I'm a little bit jealous over that, but I'll be satisfied with my cigar box for now. But well, anyway, Martin, thank you very much again for agreeing to be on the show and taking the time to talk to me about this game.
Oh, no problem. It's always a pleasure, Jeff.
So for myself and for Martin Griffiths, I want to say thanks to everyone out there for listening. Thanks to GameSurplus.com for their continued support of The Long View. I encourage you to go to GameSurplus.com and try to get yourself a copy of Pax Porfiriana right now. Martin will be happy to teach it to you. And of course, I have to give a nod to the Dice Tower and all of the fantastic podcasts on the Dice Tower Network. Go check them out and find yet another podcast that might suit your gaming interests. And be sure to check out all of the latest news and reviews from Tom and all the rest of the gang there on the Dice Tower. So for the two of us, thanks out there for listening, and have a great night.